Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're going to jump into our next module. This is module 3. We're focusing a little bit more on evidence this time around. So let me jump into this. We're going to do a quick demo here at the beginning of this module today. So before we jump into the demo, and I give you instructions for that, I'll just tell you that we are covering physical evidence and versus testimonial evidence. We're going to compare and contrast the two. And then we're going to categorize some general categories of physical evidence. We're not going to be able to do a whole comprehensive list because just about anything in forensic science could be evidence. You could have a bottle of Purell sitting on a desk could become evidence if it has a fingerprint on it, for example. So we're just going to get some general categories that CSI or forensic scientists may come into contact with frequently. So here's what we're going to do for our demo. And this is a little different than what I've done in years past because we have to do it virtually. So you're going to basically need a piece of paper and something to write with. And you can pause this at any time if you need to get those items. And then when you get back, you're going to follow all verbal instructions precisely and no cheating. There's no grade for this demo, so cheating will not help you in any way, and it'll kind of ruin the effect that we're trying to get here. So once you get those, you can pause now, get those items, and once you get those, you can start us back up again. All right, so here's what we're going to do. The instructions are as follows. I'm going to give you a list of about 15 words. Don't write them down right now. I want you to put the pen and pencil aside or paper aside, and you're going to wait until I say all 15. Then you'll pause again, and you're going to write down as many of the 15 words you can remember. And then when you unpause, we'll go back through it and see how you did, okay? All right, so I'm going to start. If you have to pause, go ahead, but I'm going to start. Bed, rest, awake, tired, dream, wake, snooze, blanket, doze, slumber, snore, nap, peace, yawn, drowsy. All right, so now what you're going to do, if you need to, you're going to pause, obviously, and then you're going to take and you're going to write down as many of those 15 words as you can. Once you get them written down, you can unpause. So we'll give you a couple of seconds here. All right, welcome back. Let's see how you guys did. We'll go through these. There's no real order, so you don't have to have them in the order that I read them. So I'll just kind of start going through a few of the words, and you check them off and see if you had those. Awake, dream, doze, sleep. Did you have sleep? If you had sleep, it actually wasn't on the list. And this is kind of what an example of something called a false memory is. And this happens frequently when we're dealing with eyewitness testimony. Your mind can play tricks on you. People can ask you leading questions or something like that that might trigger something or stimulate something in your mind to kind of give a false description or a false, inadvertent false statement as to what you may have saw. So hopefully that worked out. I know it probably didn't work for 100% of you. It never does. Some people have better memories than others. But let's go ahead and we're going to get started and do the rest of these notes, and we'll refer back to that. Okay? All right. So what is evidence? Let's go through this. There's two general types of evidence. You have testimonial evidence, which is the statements made under oath. For example, a witness identifying somebody in the courtroom as the person who committed a crime, or even during a police lineup, making a identification. This is also called direct evidence or prima facie evidence. Um, and then you have physical evidence. Physical evidence is any object or material relevant to a particular crime. It can literally be any tangible thing, large or small. It's also called real evidence. Okay, so we're going to do a comparison of these two as we go through these notes, and then we'll talk about um, a little bit more in detail about some of the physical evidence categories that you may come into contact with. So here's your assignment for this week. You have two videos to watch. That's basically part one and part two of the same video. 60 minutes video, eyewitness testimony. This was done a little while ago. It's about a gentleman named Ronald Cotton who was falsely accused of a crime. And what I want you to do is after you, or while you're watching the video, you're going to also print out the Google Doc that I put on Canvas, and you're going to use that to answer some of the questions as you're going through the video, okay? All right, so let's go ahead. We'll go on by that. That's going to be something that you're going to do on your own. So what is testimonial or direct evidence? Eyewitness accounts can provide important information leading to the arrest of criminals. However, it seems that juries are heavily influenced by eyewitness identification. In 1977 study of more than 2,000 lineups, 46% of the potential offenders who were recognized 46% of the potential offenders who were recognized, 82% of them were convicted. In 347 cases where eyewitness testimony was the only evidence, 74% of the defendants were convicted. In other words, they had no other evidence except one person's word or an eyewitness testimony against them, and 74% conviction rate. Another report in 1983 showed that jurors relied more on eyewitness testimony than they did fingerprints. So to a forensic scientist or a scientist, that's amazing to me that somebody would take somebody's word of mouth over physical evidence that might be at the crime scene. So that can be problematic if we have a false eyewitness or somebody that has a mistaken identity of a person they think committed a crime. That can be problematic. Eyewitnesses can make errors for many reasons. Here's some examples. The crime scene may have been too dark. Maybe the encounter was too brief. The presence of a weapon or the threat of a weapon may have diverted the eyewitness's attention. Sometimes when there's a weapon involved, they're so focused on the weapon that they don't even really look at the person's face that's threatening them. The fear involved in witnessing a crime could sharpen some people's focus, while others, it kind of confuses them. Errors in memory processing. That's kind of what I did with you, a little trick, right? I gave you a whole bunch of words that made you think of a particular word, sleep in this case, and basically it's a memory processing error. The time between the crime and the questioning of the witness can have an effect. That's why when police get to the scene of a crime, they usually pull eyewitnesses and victims and people that were involved in the crime aside and get their statements as soon as possible. New information can influence a memory. If they go in and start viewing mugshots, or they're asked leading questions or suggestive questions, that can actually have an effect on the memory as well. So all of the points above can change or influence memory of a witness, even one who's trying to be fair and honest. They're trying to tell the truth or trying to give as accurate a description as they can. So with that in mind, we have to keep in mind some important considerations for eyewitness testimony. So let's go through a few of these too. You have to keep in mind the type of crime and how the witness saw it. Research has found that witnesses are more accurate at remembering some characteristics, such as sex or hair color, than others, such as age or height or specific race. A witness who is physically similar to the offender is more likely to give an accurate description. Victims of serious crimes sometimes have more accurate memory over a long period of time because they actually relive the event in their minds. If it's a traumatic experience, they may even have nightmares about it, and it kind of actually lets them memorize it even more so. The presence of a weapon or the threat of violence also influences recall because it may sharpen some witnesses' focus and dull some others, confuse some others. Any type of stress tends to narrow the focus and closes out secondary information. Some types of witnesses are better at remembering than others. Children don't usually remember as well as adults do. How accurate a child's witness testimony may depend on how he or she is interviewed. So a lot of times they can be led by certain questions to make statements that might not be true. Older adults may have poor eyesight or hearing than middle-aged adults or younger adults, and their eyewitness accounts might be less accurate. Any kind of learning disability, mental disorder, if they were impaired by alcohol or drugs, or they had a head injury all during the thing, could weaken memory and recall. Interviewing techniques, and we mentioned this with the children, but it can work for anybody, right? How information is retrieved can also make a difference in the accuracy of the witness's testimony. Research has suggested that eyewitnesses are better at answering questions about what happened than they are questions about the description of the offender, for example. A witness's report about the offender's actions can be more accurate, even when there's very few good details about what the person may have looked like. Open-ended questions tend to be better. It makes for a more accurate description. So a careful choice in word influence, careful choice of words can influence memory. Leading questions such as, was the offender's shirt red, can actually lessen accuracy. It might make them think that it was red. Yeah, I think it was red, or it had some red on it, or something like that. Another good way to do that would be just to ask, what did the offender look like, instead of what was the person wearing. Or another tough one, and this doesn't seem like it's that bad, but if you say, what color shirt was he wearing, you're making the assumption that they were wearing a shirt. Maybe they had on a hoodie or a sweat jacket, or maybe they were shirtless or something like that. So that could lead them to making a false statement as well. Usually a confident witness is more likely to be accurate, although this isn't always true. Generally, if the witness claims to be absolutely certain about something, then they usually have a pretty good memory of what happened. If they're kind of muttering about it, you ask them what were they wearing, and they're like, oh man, it happened so fast. I think it was some kind of dark pants. If they're kind of and they're not certain, then you might not put as much stock into their testimony. Okay. All right. So what are some other factors to consider? Again, did the person know the accused? And if they did know the accused, what was their relationship? Is it somebody trying to get a vendetta off of somebody? Maybe they're making a false accusation to try to get back at a person. How much time has passed between the offense and the identification? Whether the witness already identified or failed to identify the defendant. Whether the witness had already identified someone else as the suspect. All of that can have an effect, right? Or can act as a factor. Most known cases of innocent person being convicted happen because of mistaken eyewitness identification. And that's what you're going to kind of see when you look at that 60-minute video and answer those questions. All right, let's move into physical evidence now. Physical evidence is any object that can establish that a crime has or has not been committed, or can link a crime and its victim or a perpetrator. It would be impossible to list all the objects that could be considered physical evidence, because it could literally be just about anything, right? There are, however, some common items that crime scene investigator and forensic scientists will see frequently, and whose examination is likely to yield significant results. So we're going to go through a list of these. We're going to go through them rather quickly, but you can go through and rewatch this video if I go too fast. So blood, semen, and saliva. All suspected blood, semen, or saliva, either liquid or dried, animal or human, present in any kind of form, would suggest relation to the offense or the person involved in the crime. This category can include stuff that could be dried blood on clothing or semen on clothing. It could be saliva that's attached to a cup, or maybe cigarette butts that are found at the scene. All of those have to be considered. Computer and digital evidence. Any kind of cell phone, computers, laptops, cameras, anything that has memory. And it's amazing what computer forensics has come around to. You could be absolutely 100% certain that a particular text or picture has been erased from a phone or a laptop, and they are able to pull some of those up, at least partially, if not entirely, and you think it's completely deleted. Any kind of documents, handwriting, typewritten documents, anything that looks like it might be forged, or ransom notes, or any type of documents. And it could be blank paper. They have ninhydrin now, where we are able to actually use a chemical substance and we can lift fingerprints from paper. So it could be just about anything. Drugs, any type of seized drug that would be in violation of the law regarding the sale, manufacture, and distribution of drugs. So it could be recreational, crack, or anything like that, to prescription drugs. Explosives, and this could be residue from the explosives. What kind of substance were they using to make the explosion? Could be shrapnel. It could be, in this case, it looks like he's swabbing the remnants of a pipe bomb. So any of those type of things would be physical evidence. Fibers, any natural or synthetic fiber whose transfer may be useful in establishing a relationship between objects or persons. Fingerprints is an obvious one. All prints, latent, visible, are considered evidence. Any kind of firearm and ammunition, discharged ammunition or intact ammunition, it doesn't matter. Glass, so any particles of glass or fragment of glass that has been transferred to a person or an object. Think of window panes as well that may have holes caused by a bullet, or maybe it was smashed out. All of that can be used. Hair, kind of similar to fiber. Any animal or human hair present could link a person to a crime. Impression evidence is kind of a wide category. It could include footprints. It could include tire tracks. It could be depressions in soft soil from other things like a glove or fabrics or ropes. Impression evidence could also include bite marks on either skin or foodstuffs. All of that's included in that impression evidence category. Organs and physiological fluids. If you have a body, then the body organs or fluids are usually submitted for toxicology. Usually they do an autopsy if it's a suspicious death, and they could use any information that they get during the autopsy to help solve what's going on or what happened to that person. Paint, any kind of liquid or dried paints. A lot of this could be transfer from one surface to another. For example, if you have a hit and run, a white car hits a red car and then flees the scene, well, you could find something similar to what you see in the picture, where you have a red paint transfer on a white vehicle, and that could be a type of evidence. It could also be paint chips from a house. A lot of times, if a house has been painted multiple times, you could get a paint chip that gets hooked on somebody's clothing, and then they find a similar paint chip that's chipping off the wall at the crime scene, and they can actually look at it on a comparison microscope and look at the layers. And if the layers match up, hey, it's yellow, and then it was blue, and then it was green, and then it was back to yellow, and it matches up the paint chip they found on the suspect, that could be a pretty incriminating piece of evidence. Any kind of petroleum products, a lot of these are used as accelerants, like gasoline and stuff, for arsons. So all of those could be a type of physical evidence. Plastic bags, one of the best areas to go to get a lot of evidence is looking at the trash, or the either inside or even out in the dumpsters, if it's at a place, a commercial place that has a dumpster. But looking through the trash, the bags themselves could be evidence, or anything inside them could be evidence. Other things that are made out of plastic, rubber, or polymers. Gunshot powder residue. So powder residues, if somebody's using a gun during a crime and they fire it, you're going to get this powder that can get on the hands or the clothing of the person that discharged the weapon. And they have, a quick chemical test that they can do. They can take a swabbing of the hands and determine if the person has gunshot powder on there, or gunpowder on there. Serial numbers for either guns or tools or stolen property can sometimes be restored. When they restore it, they can use that to identify where it came from. Soil and minerals is another one. All items containing soil or minerals, bottom of somebody's shoe, might be able to link them to a certain area or a certain place. So the soil embedded in the shoe could be used to put them at a particular location where the crime took place. Tool marks. This could be tool marks on window panes, doors, door jambs, wherever, usually from forced entry. It could be somebody using a hacksaw to cut open maybe a chain on a fence, or a yard or something like that. So any of those could be used, tool marks. Vehicle lights, this happens a lot during auto accidents. They can actually do an examination of the vehicle headlights and taillights, and they can determine whether the lights were on or off and things like that. And then you have wood and vegetative matter. Any fragments of wood, sawdust, shavings, vegetative matter discovered on clothing or shoes. This is showing like one of those burrs that get caught in people's clothing and hair and stuff like that, that could maybe link that person to a location or an object. So that kind of takes us through some of the major categories of evidence. Make sure this week your focus needs to be on getting the Unit 2 test done, as well as going through and making sure the check for understandings are done and doing the assignment with the 60-minute videos. So hopefully this kind of got us going a little bit on evidence, and we'll get into a little bit more of the exciting stuff, and maybe even possibly next week or the week after do an initial walkthrough on a mock crime scene, our first one. So have a good day.